Parent Chat is brought to you by the Lake Washington Schools Foundation. LWSF is a nonprofit organization dedicated to raising funds and amplifying community resources to ensure that every student in the Lake Washington School District has what they need to thrive, both now and in the future. The Lake Washington Schools Foundation collaborates closely with the school district to invest in and implement essential programs that remove barriers, support wellness, enhance learning, and build connections for all students. From weekend food packs for students in need to inclusive library grants to programs like Parent Chat, the Foundation's work ensures that every child has the opportunity to succeed. We offer a variety of programs and initiatives to support our mission. Here's a quick glance at some of them. You can learn more about the Foundation's work at www.lwsf.org. We encourage you to stay connected with us by subscribing to our e-newsletter to hear about upcoming events, stories of impact, and opportunities to make a difference. You can make a contribution online, and you can follow us on social media. Together, we can create a nurturing and dynamic learning environment where our children can reach their fullest potential. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our parent chat on preparing to launch. If any of you have ever watched, there's a movie on that, something about failing to launch. We don't want that for your kids, so we decided to bring in an expert on this to discuss what you need to do to get them ready. So let me see if I can stop sharing this. Let's see, there we go, excellent. Okay, so tonight is our second parent chat of the season, and we are so glad that you're here. For those of you who are live, you can say hi in the chat box so we know you're there. And for those of you who are watching the recording, let us know if you have any follow-up questions on this webinar. And we are going to ask everyone, if you have questions, to put that in the Q&A box so it doesn't get lost. And if you just have comments, or if you just, if we're asking you a question, then you can put the answers in the chat box. We want to make sure this feels interactive to you, that you are able to ask questions and make comments. We don't want to just be here talking at you. So let me introduce our speaker tonight. We are lucky to have Traci with us, who is the owner, founder of Adulting University. And I'm going to pull up her bio so that I don't miss anything. And I had it up. One second. Text doesn't always work. Okay, here we go. Okay, so Traci is the founder of Adulting University and is a dedicated guide on the journey of high school and beyond. With over 12 years of professional experience in higher education, career tech, and industry, she brings a wealth of knowledge and insights to support your family's unique needs. Traci's passion is to provide you with affordable and flexible support amidst the chaos of today's demanding schedules, from sports commitments to school and extracurriculars. She understands that every teenager's journey is unique, and she's here to help your family thrive. And just so you know, she's also an associate coach at TeenWise, which is fantastic. So I know that she's very well educated on this matter, and she is just a great source of energy, great source of knowledge. And so I'm so glad to welcome her tonight. Traci, we'd love to welcome you on screen. And there we go. Perfect. Yeah. So welcome, Traci. And I'm so glad you're here, because this idea of preparing our kids to launch is something that is so important. And even though your bio says teenagers, this is for even the littles. Like, everybody needs to learn some stuff before they launch out of our home. So, but welcome, Traci.
Well, thank you. Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to get to be here and to be able to help all these families with that whole, like you said, not failure to launch. We want preparing to launch instead. As much as I do love that movie, though, but
yeah, it's a good movie. But yes, it reminds us that we need to work on these things.
Exactly. So that your child's not, 40 years old still living in your basement, unless that's really what you want. Perfect. Awesome. Well, am I good to share then, Sherry?
Yes,
Is that
go ahead and share your
all right?
slides.
Let's
And
go.
I may ask questions as we go. And if anybody has questions, you don't need to have the perfect time to ask them. You can throw them in the Q&A box and we will ask them when we have a break. So don't have to wait.
Exactly. Perfect. Well, can we see my screen okay? Everything good
Yes,
there? Sweet.
everything's good.
Awesome. Cool. Well, hi everybody. I'm so glad to get to be here to be talking with you guys about this. This is definitely my passion, is being able to help our youth and be able to prepare them for those next steps and being able to help support parents on that journey as well. So today we're going to be talking about several different things that are really those essential foundations that every kiddo needs to have, needs to know before they leave high school. So if you have younger kiddos, that means time is on your side and you have more time to work on these skills. If your students are older, then this is a great time to start to have these conversations and be able to get them ready for those things. So high level, showing what we're going to talk about today. There's obviously tons and tons of skills out there. I mean, if we're being honest, there are so many different skills that students really need to have. However, from all my work I've done with youth, these are my core ones. So these are the top 6 skills that teens and young adults need to have to be successful in life. And we're going to go through each of these individually, but those are effective communication, emotional intelligence, healthy relationships, critical thinking and decision making, financial literacy, and then that independence and self-sufficiency. So we're going to talk about these as we go. Please, like Sherry said, drop any questions you have in our Q&A there. I would love to answer those questions for you. I'm going to have you guys engaging with me along the way. So make sure you have your chat pulled up and you're ready to go in there because I'd love to hear from you guys as well, especially because I can't see y'all's beautiful faces. So all right, so first up, this is a foundational skill, right? This is the foundation to everything else, is effective communication. When you hear effective communication, what do you think of? When you think about your student, your kiddo, whether they're a kindergartner or a senior in high school, what do you think of when you think of communication? And feel free to drop it in the chat. I would love to know kind of your thoughts around that. Like, what does communication look like to you? And why is this so important? So when we talk about communication at Adulting University, we're talking about the ability to not only just talk to people, but understand how to talk to people. It's like speaking a different language. And for those of you that do have preteens or teenagers, you know what that feels like, right? Having that ability to speak a different language because preteens and teens do not speak the same language as mom and dad most of the time. And so that communication piece is so important because it really sets a solid foundation for your relationship and a good precedent for them as they move on in life with other people. So when we talk about effective communication, your student, they have to know this stuff, right? When they're going to have a job someday, when they're going to be in relationships with people, friendships, all these different things, communication is so important. So when we talk about how do I teach my kid this stuff though, Traci, I don't understand, like, how am I going to teach my kid how to communicate effectively? Because right now we don't communicate really well. They just tune me out or they ignore me or I repeat myself 100,000 times. So number one, we really have to practice a few things. So, and these are kind of out of order a little bit, I'll be honest with you, but for me, styles is one of those, knowing how does your kid communicate? How do you communicate? A lot of times it may not be always on the same page. And so it's important to know what's my communication style. If you guys have ever heard of love languages, right? The 5 love languages, very well recommended for people in relationships. It's no different with your teenager. Your teenager has a love language, but they also have a communication language, and it doesn't always match what yours is. So being able to start with that. And then active listening. And this can be so hard as parents sometimes because what do we want to do? We want to jump in. We want to give the advice. We want to give the support. We want to just kind of fix the things, fix the problems. And so taking that step back and just listening, asking questions when the opportunity presents itself to learn more, to be able to listen even more, and ask if it's okay to give advice and being able to express things clearly, right? That clear communication is really the true cure for communication with your teenager, is that clear communication, being able to have them feel heard and understood. And we can start this at a young age. We do this with our daughter. She's only a year and a half compared to our son who's in the preteen stage, and being able to squat down to her level, right? Making that eye contact with her, asking her questions, because even though she doesn't like communicate super great yet, she will try to point to things or talk. And so it's like, okay, and being patient with her and trying to really listen and understand what she's trying to say. And it's making her feel heard and listened to, knowing that, okay, this is important. Mom cares about what I'm trying to tell her, even though it's baby jargon and I don't always understand it. Right. So I want to ask you guys a question, and feel free to put this in the chat. What's the biggest communication challenge you face with your teenager or your kid in general, even if they're younger kiddos? So I would love to hear in the chat, what is one of your biggest challenges with communication?
Tracy, as they're thinking about that, I'll answer that. One of the things frequently that I hear from parents is um, the other side of it is my teen's not listening, which kind of goes back to how do we teach them all of this, right? Communication, part of it's listening, part of it's speaking. So I
Mhm.
think that's a challenge.
Yes. No, I agree. That's a big challenge, especially in the teen years, is not listening to your parents because, oh, you're just nagging me, mom, or oh my gosh, you're a broken record, mom or dad, right? And I think that's where it comes down to that whole understanding how they communicate. So I use the DISC assessment for people that are familiar with that when I work with students. And I love that style assessment because it's a very in-depth assessment. There are free ones out there, but I say if you're going to do it, go all in and buy the actual DISC assessment because it is very, very good. And it will give you insight into how your student communicates, right? If they're a very analytical person, they need details. You can't just say, hey, I need you to go do this. They're going to be like, well, why? Well, what exactly do you need me to do? I need all the instructions. I need all the details. I need everything. You got other students who might be, very introverted or very sensitive to things. So how you approach them is going to look very different. So understanding how your teen takes information is a big part of that process. If we want our teen to listen to us, we have to speak to them in a way that they're going to understand and receive it. And that can be a challenge. Yes. For example, how was your day? Good. Yes. Yes, exactly. I love those questions, right? How was your day? Good. What'd you do today? Oh, nothing, right? Went to school. Yes, great point there. So sometimes looking at other things and maybe looking at open-ended questions that are not always school related, or it could be something specific, what did your math class, like, what did you do in math class today? Like, go specific questions instead of how was your day today? Because most of the time you're going to get the answer. Oh, it was good. It was fine. It was okay. Ask more specific questions about something like that, right? Having that conversation of, oh, hey, you said you were going to be doing this today. Like my son, he's always telling me about recess, right? That's his thing. He's at that age where it's still all about recess. So that's always the first go-to question because he will open up immediately about that one and tell me all about it and all the details. I heard about it the whole car ride home today from his co-op about how he had recess and they played football and he was the star athlete, right? And so those are the kind of things when you have those conversations, you want to know more from your students, have a more specific open-ended question with them. And sometimes, especially in the teen years, they're still going to not give you the best answers. So it's also timing, right? Knowing when is the right time to ask these questions or to have those conversations. I talk about this a lot in my book that I'm writing with this, with teens especially. Go for a walk, going for a car ride where they're not face to face with you, making it easier for them to have conversations by being like next to you, not feeling that pressure and being able to just have being out in a space that is more comfortable for them to connect and talk to you. Yes, yes, DISC assessment is, yes, can give you insight. Exactly. So that is one of the big foundational pieces because everything else really does start to build off this, as you guys are going to kind of see as we go through here. So our next area is emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence is one that, let's be honest, most of us adults still need to work on. So this is one of those skills that everybody in this world really can improve on. You never are going to have the top tier emotional intelligence. It's never going to be 100%. It's something we are always improving. But when we talk about emotional intelligence, this isn't your IQ. This isn't, your intellect. It's more how you are able to manage emotions. So this is so important for our youth because we see this all the time, right? When you see online bullying, I mean, I'm not going to talk politics, but politics is a great example of that. Anytime people are divisive on something or they're getting offended by something or any of those kind of areas, it's an emotional intelligence thing. If you have a high emotional intelligence, you're actually less offended by things because you can process those feelings. You can process, well, why is this triggering me right now? why is this hurting me right now? And you can dig deeper to figure out exactly what it is because it's not the person, it's what they said, but it's not what they said, right? It's how you took what they said. And that's really what emotional intelligence is all about. And when we can help our kids have a strong emotional intelligence, they are going to be so much more successful in life all the way around than most of their peers will ever be because they're going to be able to handle stress better. They're going to be able to have so much more self-awareness of who they are, how they take information, how they interact with other people. Those empathy skills are so important in emotional intelligence, being able to understand people's different perspectives and points of view doesn't mean they have to agree with it, but understanding where people are coming from. I love this picture here. I chose this for a very specific reason, right? Because our littlest kiddos, they don't have a high emotional intelligence. They're the ones that they're like, man, this toy is mine. And then they start fighting over the truck and they're pulling and they're screaming at each other and their whole world just came crashing down because their toy got taken away. They don't know how to manage their emotions very well. Unfortunately, there are some adults these days that act like these little children fighting over the toy truck. And we don't want our kids to be those people. So helping them be able to develop these skills is so important. So how do you do this? Number one is going to be that resiliency. To develop resilience and emotional intelligence, we have to really dive in with our students and help them understand and process their emotions. When they get upset or triggered by something, it's helping them walk through it and understand, well, why am I getting so upset about this? Why is this bothering me at my core? It's not just somebody said something that insulted me. It was what about that insult? Because somebody can insult you in one way and it doesn't bother you, and insult you in a different way and it does. So it's what is it about that specific insult that's really getting to me? A lot of the time it feels like, oh, I felt disrespected. I felt like my trust was broken. I felt betrayed, right? Usually very deeper feelings or things. A lot of time trauma is what is triggering those things. So helping our students be able to manage it and then learn how to actually cope through it instead of going off when they get upset, helping them be able to understand, okay, how can I do some maybe deep breathing right now and kind of calm myself down and be able to process this logically before I react, helping them take a step away. And yes, great question. Breaking out of the show. Yeah, we will talk about that because that's a big one with emotional intelligence as well. That is a great question. So this is one of the biggest challenges you will ever face as a parent is teaching your teens this, especially because if you're not modeling it at home, and we all have those moments, right? I have moments where I go off on my kids. I have moments where I snap and I'm screaming at somebody, right? It happens. We do those things, but it's our job to kind of really model this behavior for our kiddos. So some of us are going to have to do that work on the front end of, okay, I'm getting really mad at this person in front of me on the highway right now, and I want to scream and yell at them. But guess what? The kids are in the car. That's not me modeling good emotional intelligence by going off on this person that's driving their car very, very slowly and way under the speed limit, right? So being able to implement and practice at home and show these skills are going to be one of the best ways to get through to your students, especially when you got older kiddos that are in that age and zone where they're like, yeah, mom, whatever. Yeah, dad, whatever. I'm not going to listen to you. It's fine. I'm going to do my own thing. So you modeling that behavior goes a long way. If you're constantly yelling at them or having screaming matches with your teenager, that's the behavior they're going to emulate. Instead of you saying, hey, you know what? I understand you're upset right now. And, I'm upset too. My feelings were hurt as well. Let's take a moment to calm down and let's revisit this later. And being able to kind of take that step back and try to process our emotions without the emotion behind it, which is really, really hard. But that's truly what emotional intelligence is about. So curious for you guys, how many of you have seen your teen or your kiddo struggle with really handling those emotions? Whose kiddos kind of sometimes maybe go off the rails or they get really upset about something and they have kind of extreme emotions in different directions? Has anybody experienced that with their kids? I would imagine everybody in this
Yeah.
in this group.
Yeah, while everybody's thinking about that, I'll give you an example of this. When I talk to large groups, oftentimes like middle school girls, I'll ask them who in here has cried really big sobbing tears over something that was really small, like your sandwich had mayo on it. And almost every single girl raises her hand because it's that age group. The emotions are just so big. And
Hmm.
so when they can understand what's triggering it, or in that situation, like the fact their bodies are changing and everything, to understand that too, then they can kind of process through that faster and understand it's okay, it's normal to feel all of these emotions.
Exactly. And I love that because that's exactly what it's about. It's okay to feel the emotions. It's teaching them how do we process the emotions and react in a way that's, you know, realistic, right? Not like you said, like having a complete meltdown. We're going to still have meltdowns. Everybody has meltdowns sometimes. Everybody overreacts sometimes. That's human nature. That's why we're not really born with extreme emotional intelligence because we have to learn it, right? We have to process it. And it is something you are working at every single time you get upset, every single time you get offended, every single time you see something on social media and you want to go be a keyboard warrior, right? We have to take that step back and be like, okay, why am I getting so triggered by this right now? What are the emotions I'm feeling and how am I going to work through those emotions and be able to manage them in a healthier way and express them in a healthier way, right? Nobody in the chat is nobody's experienced these crazy emotions with their kids. I find that very hard to believe right now. All right, so
Yeah.
let's talk about our next one. So this is one, and Sherry's going to appreciate this one because she, I know, specializes in this area of relationships. But healthy relationships is another one. And when we talk about healthy relationships, this is across the board. This is not just relationships in the sense of romantic relationships someday. This is friendships. This is relationships with you, with siblings, with family members. It is so important for our kids to understand how to have a healthy relationship. What's a healthy relationship? What's a toxic relationship? Teaching them this stuff early is so powerful because what's going to happen is if they're really secure in understanding what they're okay with, what they're not okay with at a younger age when it comes to relationships, having those boundaries and things in place when they're older and they're teenagers, they're going to be more intentional with, their friendships, their dating relationships. That's going to eliminate not all but some of that risk that can happen where we've all been there, right? In teenagers where your heart's been completely broken because you maybe dated somebody that really wasn't a good person or they weren't a good fit for you or they ran you through the mud, right? We see these stories all the time of I'm in all these parent groups and it's always like, oh my gosh, my kid, I just wish they'd break up with this person because this person doesn't treat them right. They're not good to them and all these things. And it's because they went into a relationship and now they got the love blind glasses on, right? They have the pink glasses that are, oh, well, it's okay. They didn't mean it. It's okay. They didn't mean it because I love this person. Where if they have strong boundaries up front and they know what they're willing to accept and what they're willing not to accept, it makes that so much better. And it makes relationships stronger when you have healthy boundaries in place, when you know how to communicate with each other, when you know how to manage conflicts. Who here has ever experienced a conflict with somebody they loved or cared about, right? That is a normal behavior. That is a normal thing to happen. But let's be honest, if we don't know how to manage conflict in a healthy way within our relationships, it could ruin our relationships, right? I know Coach Traci and I experienced that, right? With a lot of the teen girls we work with at TeenWise, where they've experienced, their friendships have fell apart over fighting or arguing or other things that have happened, that conflict that can happen, especially in the teen years. So having this healthy relationship pieces in place. So teaching your teenager, your kiddo, right? You could be a 5-year-old, teaching them a healthy boundary, teaching them, how to respect other people's boundaries, how to that communication piece, that conflict resolution piece, right? Being able to start to implement those things at a younger age is so important because that is something that is going to take them so much further in life, right? They're going to be able to better react with their colleagues someday, with their bosses, with their spouse, their own kids, right? And who here doesn't want to have a better relationship with their kids at home too? Again, showing them these things, and a lot of it is showing them in person. Has anybody had to go through any of that drama with their kiddos yet? Any friendship drama or relationship drama? Where they've had to lost the significant other or a friendship, they had a fight or any of those things. Has anybody had to experience that yet? And if you're not comfortable, you don't have to share that. But I always like to see what some of those challenges are, right? This is something that can really be challenging in the preteen and teen world, especially.
One thing I'd say about this in particular is a few things. First of all, boundaries. Teens really feel like if they set the boundaries, they're going to lose that friendship. So the friendships actually are really great training grounds for going on and having a romantic relationship, right? Where they start to learn these patterns. So it's really important that they are learning boundaries, communication, and conflict resolution now, because the patterns that kids create as middle schoolers sticks with them for like the rest of their life if they don't process and change. So, also with conflict resolution, this is a big one. A lot of the girl drama happens because they don't want conflict, so they do all these other behaviors to avoid that direct one-to-one. And one thing that I've seen right now is in college, this stuff they're really big issues because um, first of all, it's the first time they're out on their own. But the other piece of it is that with the pandemic, a lot of our kids are like 2, 3 years behind on their social development. So it's something that we have to actually teach them before they leave the house, because whether it's in college or a job or, whatever the situation is, they have to know how to have a compassionate conflict conversation. So
Mhm.
I think this slide is just extremely important.
Yes, I agree. And because we see it everywhere, you're going to have conflict. And it goes both ways for understanding for the people that are more like, hey, I'm okay with like kind of going head to head with somebody. But there's also our students who they let people walk all over them. And I think that's that important piece too. I mean, that's how I was growing up. I was always like the people pleaser. I wanted everybody to get along. And I still struggle with that sometimes, but being at like conflict, I was like, oh, I don't want to deal with it. I would just like kind of like fold and be like, it's fine, like it's okay. I'm just gonna give in to you because I don't want to deal with it. Or I'm just gonna go over here and do something else because I don't want to deal with it. And that's not healthy either. And I mean, you see it, like you said, in the college space with roommates. That's a really big one that I see come up a lot with the conflict where one roommate is doing their own thing and doing whatever the heck they want to do. The other roommate is the opposite and is like, oh my gosh, I want her or him to stop doing this, but they won't. I don't know how to approach them. I'm uncomfortable. I'm miserable. Right. And but teaching them how to have those conversations is so valuable for them to handle those kinds of situations they're going to find themselves in, right? If they get a boss that wants to walk all over them, take advantage of them, being able to have that, being able to stand up to them and saying, we're not going to do this. And
Mhm.
here's how this is going to go, right? So yes, that conflict piece and those healthy relationships is so important for our kiddos to navigate young and working through as we get older.
And part of this, Tracy, like this is what we need to teach them. But one of the things we have to do in order for them to learn this stuff is to get out of their way so that
Mhm.
we don't intervene with every little thing.
Yep.
What, like calling the mom, calling the school counselor, calling, that we're trying to jump in and handle the conflict for them or
Yep.
the, disappointment for them. And we really are robbing them of the opportunity to learn these things when we step in for everything. Doesn't mean we never intervene, but for the most part, we need to really work on stepping back, let them have the opportunity not just to learn these things, but when they are dealing with these things, it goes back to the emotional intelligence too, right? They learn that by processing through these moments.
Exactly. It's one of the things that I talk about in my book. I call it approach like a coach. As a parent, that's one of the best things you can do is approach as if you're a coach. And when we're a coach, we're not doing it for them, right? We're not running on the soccer field and playing for them. We're giving them the tools, we're teaching them the plays, we're teaching them how to do it. But at the end of the day, they're the ones going on the field playing the game. And that's really what our job is as parents is, hey, we're going to equip you and give you these tools and help you understand how to use them, but then you're going to have to use them in real life because we can't do it for you. So I love that. That's a great point on that, Sherry, of it's we can't they got to do it on their own.
Yeah,
That
and
independence.
I know everyone's probably thinking, of course they're going to do it on their own, but I am in those college groups and Facebook, and the moms are still trying to resolve the conflicts for them. It's coming from a loving place, but yeah, we got to let go at some point.
Hmm. I feel like we go back to like kindergarten. Like if you were sitting there preschool or kindergarten with your kid or at the playground and some other little, 4-year-old comes over to your 4-year-old and they snatch a toy out of their hand, you're not going to go over to the other 4-year-old, knock them down and take it back from them and give it back to the thing or go tattle on them to their parent.
Hopefully not.
Right. I hope not. I hope not. Please don't do that, you guys. But So why do we do that for our teenagers? Because that's really what we're doing. We're going over and shoving the other kid down, yelling at their mom, grabbing the toy back and giving it back to our kid. And that's not teaching them anything except for, oh, well, if I, didn't get this, then I guess mom will just take care of it for me and I don't have to worry about it. So yeah, so I love that. Um, so our next one is another big one. And this one, I will be honest with you guys, and I don't want to offend anybody when I say this, but the reality of this is a huge skill that is seriously lacking in our upcoming generations of students. Unfortunately, I've seen this firsthand from not only my background in what I've been doing for years, but even with all the employers I interact with all the time. And this is one of the biggest skills. This and communication are two of the biggest skills that they are saying students are really lacking. And it's critical thinking and decision making. We can go into a whole nother spiel about why. I will tell you my personal opinion is part of it is technology and social media. Everything is so easily accessible to our students now. All they got to do is Google it or ask Alexa or ask Siri or ask whoever, and they get the answer right then and there. So what they're not doing is learning how to do research. They're not learning how to think critically, where it's like evaluating information, understanding bias, right? And again, not to talk election, but elections are great times to really put these skills into practice, right? Because there's so much misinformation out there across the board. And we see it on social media where somebody sees something, they run with it, regardless of what the topic is. So helping our students really understand how to think critically and how to make good decisions. Think about this, parents. If your teenager knew how to make really good decisions and actually weigh all the options, do you think that you would be a little less stressed when they start driving or when they leave home, right? Because they're more equipped to make better decisions. Doesn't mean they're always going to get it right, but it's giving them those tools. So when we talk about critical thinking, if the main thing you can focus on teaching your teenagers, I would say teaching them how to analyze information. So being able to research, find sources, determine if information is legitimate or not, and is there any bias present, right? Is somebody trying to convince me of something on their own opinions, not on facts? That is so important because that is teaching them how to go find the truth that's going to then help in the decision-making process. And then when we talk about decision making, helping them understand consequences. So this is helping them see the big picture, weighing the pros and cons, helping them navigate and understand all the possibilities for whatever decision they're trying to make. It could be something as simple as, do I join this club or not? It could also be as, do I get in this car with my intoxicated friend or not? So helping them really work through what are those situations, because let's be honest, kids through teenagers, your brain's not fully developed till you're about 25. So what our brain is operating on during that moment is that very much reactive type of model. So we make decisions in the moment, reactive based on whatever's going on. We don't think it through. We're not sitting there like, wait a minute, let me think through these facts for a second and let me think through this information. Let me weigh all my pros and cons before I make a decision. We're not doing those things, right? If you go hang out with some 5-year-olds or 8-year-olds for a little while, you're going to see that really quickly, right? The decisions are not always the best decisions. Why did you jump off the couch? Well, it looked like fun. Okay, perfect, right? So understanding and helping our students understand and how to look at consequences. This could be as simple as sitting down with your student next time they have a decision that they're working through and say, hey, let's sit down together and let's do a pros and cons table or a list. And let's just talk through this together and ask them the questions. Don't tell them what the cons are, what the pros are. Ask them, well, what are some good things that could come out of this decision? And talk through that with them. Well, what are some things that maybe might not be the best thing that could come out of this? What are some things that could go wrong with this decision? And again, asking questions, being that coach, helping work through it with them, but not doing it for them. And this is going to take them so much further because they're going to make better decisions because they're going to actually make informed decisions, not just off the cuff decisions, which can be so important. So I'm curious, when was the last time your kiddo maybe made not the greatest decision in the world? If you guys are willing to share, I always love some of these stories because some of them are very funny. If you want to share those, some of those funny decisions that your kid probably learned a lesson out of it, but didn't quite think through their decisions in the process. So if you want to share that in the chat, I would love to hear those. So feel free to drop some of those stories in the chat. I know that I have countless ones with especially my son. Again, he's in that preteen stage, and I feel like it's worse now than when he was younger. I'm like, boy, did you think it all before you did that? And he's just like, no. I'm like, He told me the other day his brain just doesn't work anymore because he's going through puberty.
I like that he's informed.
Yep, he's very informed about it. I'm like, good. I appreciate that you acknowledge that, buddy. That's good. That's very
Yeah.
good.
There was something you said that is just super important, and it is that you allow them to make decisions. Like that you, and even like sitting down with them and walking them through making the decision. But also if they come and ask you something like, hey, can I go to a party? Right? There's no parents there. And instead of saying no, which is what is still probably going to be the end result for most people, depending on their age, sit down and talk about, okay, why do you think I might be concerned about you going? You know, what are the reasons why you might not want to go? What are the things that could go wrong? Why are the reasons you do want to go? So we need to make sure we have the positives in that too. And I like to talk to teens about decisions they might have to make in the future when it's not in the moment. So whether it's about drinking, whether it's about, as you mentioned, driving with someone who's under the influence, even about dating and the physical boundaries they have for that, the limits that they're setting for themselves. Like if we can talk to them about it ahead of time, then when they're in the moment, emotionally thinking, not logically, they've already got a plan for it.
Yep, exactly, exactly. And I think, like you said, it's letting them make those decisions. And here's the reality. Sometimes let them make the bad decision. If you know they're going to be safe, you know, it's not something like getting in a situation like going to a party where there's no parents there, but it's something where it's like, okay, this is not going to be a good decision. There's going to be some consequences, but they're going to be okay and safe. Let them make the decision. Let them fail. Let them go through that bad decision, those consequences, because that's really life's best learning tool is when those things happen. And for the critical thinking, one of the things I love to do with my son to teach the skill, and he doesn't realize I'm teaching it to him, is when he wants something, I have him validate it. Well, why? Why do you want this? So he's been trying to get me to let him play Fortnite forever. I am very something about Fortnite. I'm just like, no, we're not playing Fortnite. And again, he's almost 12, but he's like, I want to play Fortnite. So he actually one day came to me and he had all these stacks of research of why Fortnite was legitimate. And I sat there and I heard about it. And we had a good conversation about it. And I was like, you know, I really appreciate this, buddy. I really appreciate this information. I think this is great. However, then we had a conversation about all the information he pulled was only from his perspective and his side, supporting his argument. So then we were like, well, let's go look at some of the other areas and take you personally into account with the situation. And so it was just a really good opportunity because he actually went and did his own research project without any initiative at all because he wanted something bad enough. So that's a great opportunity for our kiddos to go learn how to do some of this, you know, deeper diving on things and to find different pieces of information as we go through this, especially in a world of information and so much false information out there. It is so important for our kids to know what's not real and what is real. Otherwise, they're going to fall into that trap of believing everything, the gullibility, all that stuff. And we don't want that for our kids. We don't want them to make decisions based off of lies. Not a great place to be in at all for our students. So, all right. So we've talked a lot about the soft skills because that's really, again, foundational. We've got to get these things right first. Then we're going to talk about some of those more practical skills because this is the other piece of it, right? Financial literacy is a huge one. And I know this is being like talked about a ton throughout the country, but I'm going to talk about this because I'm a financial coach and I need to talk about this because the reality is students actually want to know this stuff. They want to know how to manage money because they see how poorly the adult population is managing money in our country. They see the debt, they see the student loan debt, they see these things happening and they're like, I don't want to be part of that, but how do I do this? You know, how do I manage this money? And let's be honest, inflation and costs of things are outrageous. If you have an elementary school kiddo, by the time they graduate high school, I don't even want to know how much gas prices are going to be. So it's important for them to understand money. And there's multiple pieces to this. The three foundational ones that I'm like, at least have them know these things before they leave home. And I'll give you some tools for littler kiddos that you can start doing this with, but definitely your teenagers when they get a job, anytime. I mean, phenomenal time to start with them. Budgeting is number one. It's managing your money. How do I manage money? And a budget is truly, that is what it's for. It is a tool to tell your money where you want it to go. So helping our kiddos understand money and understand how to manage their money in a healthy way that then prioritizes different things. Not, well, yeah, every penny is going to something, but it doesn't always mean it's going to what it should be going to. Helping them prioritize what's important, what do they want to save for, right? Saving is so important, not just emergency savings, but retirement. Over half of our population doesn't even have a retirement account. Like people that are not very far from retiring do not have retirement. And that's heartbreaking. And I know as parents, we don't want that for our kids, right? We don't want our kids to be 60 years old or 70 years old still working because they don't have any money to retire. So being able to teach saving early, because not everybody's a natural saver. Some of us are natural spenders, and I am one of those with certain situations. So I have to be really cautious of these things. But savings is important, and helping them put it into a goal, right? What do they want to save for? Okay, they're 12 and 13. They're starting to think, man, a couple years, I want to get to drive and I want a car. Cool. That's a great time to talk about a savings goal. If they want to go to college, any of those things, even if it's as simple as, hey, I want to buy the new video game that's coming out or some Jordans. Yeah, I mean, mom and dad, if you want to buy them, you could, or you could say, hey, cool, that's a great goal. Let's put a savings goal in place. And we're going to put some of your allowance towards this goal. And then you're going to be able to buy those Jordans and you're going to appreciate them way more when it's your money versus when it's mine. Right. So helping them understand that, and then responsible spending. I will tell you, the foundation to successful money management is all about mindset. It is all about how your kiddos view money. And a lot of that is based on how you view money. So we want our kids to have a very healthy, positive money mindset, not a, oh, I just got to spend it because I got it, or, oh my gosh, I can't spend anything because we're broke, we're broke, we're broke. Even if you are broke, talking about all the time is not putting your mindset in a really good place. So mindset is really important. So having that more growth mentality mindset, that positive mindset, makes a huge difference when it comes to money. So that is a place you could start. So if you have younger kiddos, I'm talking as young as, 4 or 5 years old, you can start this model. So start with something very simple, 3-bucket system. Let's say you have spending, you have savings, and you have giving. Giving is a key, regardless of, I know a lot of people associate giving with religion. It can be, absolutely. If you're a religious person, you can 100% tithe. If you're not, give it to charity. Give it to somebody in need, right? But giving away money is the number one way to not be selfish with money. It is the number one way to not have a negative mindset about money. Giving away money, you can't, it literally does something in our brain when we give it away. So 3 buckets. What I typically recommend, 10% into savings, 40% into, 10% into giving, 40% to savings, and then 50% to spend. That is a really good building block because it's teaching habits early that can then build and grow as they get older. So then as your students get older to those preteen teen years, then we can start to shift the amounts. But now they've established a habit where they just automatically are used to giving. They're automatically used to saving money, and it just becomes second nature to them. If you've been somebody that has, spent money your whole life and you've never saved, and now all of a sudden you're in the real world making 40, 50, $60,000 a year, that money's not, you're not gonna have much to show for it because it's going to be gone because you've never learned how to manage it properly. So this piece is so important. Bring your kiddos into the money conversations at home, right? If you guys have a family budget, if you guys have family money conversations, which if you don't, you should make sure you have those. Bring your kids into it. We do that with our son. And I mean, again, he's 12. He still doesn't have the full concept of money, but we talk about it. When we go to the grocery store, I have him add up some things and he's starting to see like, wow, stuff is expensive. I'm like, you're right, it is. And I've seen him start to shift where before he's like, I want this, I want this, I want this. And we always say, we're like, no, you don't need that right now. But he's now asking less. And a lot of times he's like, do I have the money to pay for this? And he doesn't like to spend his own money on things. He loves giving it away though. He loves to give his money to other people, which cracks me up all the time. He was trying to give us all money for our birthdays. I'm like, buddy, you don't have to do that. But again, it's instilling good habits with your kiddos. So make sure you're bringing them into the conversation and talking about it. I think that's where things went wrong with money. We had multiple generations that didn't talk about money. It was like, hush, hush, we don't talk about money. That's, nope, my parents were like that. Like, oh no, we don't talk about how much we make. Oh, we don't talk about how much stuff costs. And I had no concept of money when I left home because it was never talked about. And so it's very important to start to instill those things early. So Who here has ever had a money conversation with their kiddos where they were kind of like had an aha moment where their kid was like, "Oh gosh, how much does that cost?" Has anybody had that yet? Or their kid had to buy something on their own for the first time
Yeah.
and was like, "Ooh."
Yeah, I'll tell you, when my kids were little, we used to go to Target and that was like our pastime and they would want this and that. And finally I was like, this is not teaching them anything. So I started giving them an allowance. And so when they would ask for something, I would say, well, you've got your allowance. Is that enough for it? And if it was, they would be like, I don't want to spend it on that. So then they would put it back, right? So they
Mhm,
had that. It's not, do you have the money, but is that responsible spending or is it what you want to use your money on? The
mhm,
other big time was when one of my kids was going to college. And we, in our family, we set aside a certain amount for college. It wasn't like we were going to go through all of our retirement in order to send them to college. We said, this is how much you have. You have to pay the difference. And so one of them was like, well, everybody has debt coming out of school. So yeah, I want to go to that school. I'm going to come out with $100,000 in debt, but everybody does that. And I was like, hold up, let's talk about this. So we did the spreadsheet of here's how much you'd have to pay for how many years. And we didn't even get to the interest part. And she's like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So bringing them in, like you said, into the conversation, figuring it out, looking at the numbers, understanding that, and also doing that with the savings. If show them if
mhm,
they start doing that with their first job, what they're going to have by the time they're 30, then it
mhm.
really starts to mean something versus I just need to put it in savings.
Exactly. Well, and you can do a Roth IRA even if your kid's a minor, because you can sign that. There are some that are youth focused, but then you can also be a co-signer on it and have something for them so that they can start to earn that retirement money as soon as they get their first job. If they're 16, you can start to put money aside in that. And that is like so valuable. I mean, it's so crazy how the numbers really work because you could invest from like 18 to 28 or 30 and then stop, and you're still going to have more money in your retirement than somebody who waits till they're 30 years old to start and then keeps investing. It's just crazy how that works. And you, like you said, Sherry, the biggest thing, and this is where I say bring your kids into the picture because they need to see it. They've not lived on their own. They've not paid bills. They've not had a job that makes, more than $10 an hour. So they don't have a concept of what this really looks like until they're out in it. And if they wait until that point, then reality smacks them right in the face and it's not pretty, right? Like you talked about with the colleges. Oh, I go a whole pet peeve on the college costs. I see that all the time with parents. It's okay to your kid to not go to a college that's going to put them in that kind of debt. Like it's
Mhm.
okay. There's plenty of other options. But helping them just visualize it and be able to make that decision on their own by seeing the numbers. A lot of times, once they see the numbers, they're like, oh, didn't quite realize that's the reality of it. Because $100,000, oh, it's $100,000. That's no big deal. I'll make that after I graduate. Okay. But did you count interest? You're not putting your whole year's salary on it. So let's talk about
Yeah.
this, right? Because they don't grasp those things because they haven't learned it and they haven't experienced it. So money is a big one, right? Huge, huge area that students really, really need to have this before they leave. All right, our final one. I know there's a lot of things on this slide because it's a really important slide, but this one is that independence and self-sufficiency. So when we talk about this, this is their ability to live without you guys, right? And I know that's harsh, and I love you, so don't take it personally. But that's the reality, right? That's the goal as parents is that our kids are going to be able to fly from the nest and not fall on their face, that they're going to just fly and take off and find their little nest there with their family or their friends or whatever and be able to make it on their own without us having to be there, right? You don't want your kid to move away from home and then everything falls apart and now they're in a worse place than what they started and now they're moving back with you anyways and now they're starting all over. Not a good place to be in. So here are just a few things that really, if we're talking specifically independence and self-sufficiency that we want to work on with our students. Number one is time management, getting them to understand how to really manage their time, just like their money. Time is money. Time is so important. You only have so much of it. So we just throw it to the wind and we kind of do whatever we do. We're teaching our kids how to prioritize, how to understand what's important to them and what's not. And for those of us who have kids that are yes kids that like to say yes to everything and take on all the things, helping them understand and learn how to, okay, but do I need to say yes to all the things? Is it okay if I say no because I really just don't want to go do this right now? Absolutely, right? Helping them encourage those things. So, two is responsibility. This is another big one, right? And this is, again, one of those areas why so many students are not 100% ready for life when they get into it is because they've not had a lot of responsibility on their own. So helping them take ownership of their actions. We went back to, right, letting them make some bad decisions and taking responsibility for it instead of jumping in and trying to help or support them, right? Maybe they made a bad call at school or they did something they shouldn't have done at school. Instead of going in there, flames blazing coming on into the teacher situation, let's talk about, okay, well, you know what? You have to learn from this. You didn't do your homework. You didn't study. You failed the quiz. And guess what? There's consequences to that. We have to teach them responsibility because unfortunately what happens if you don't take responsibility for things, we all know this, right? We've all been in the workforce at some point. We've all done these things. What happens if you don't take responsibility for things? You try to put it off on everybody else. It doesn't usually end well, right? If we can't take responsibility for things, then we are setting ourselves up for failure and not in a good way, right? Some failure is good because it teaches us stuff, but when we're not taking responsibility, we're just not being an adult at the end of the day. Three is self-care. And I know this is a one of those topics that it's gotten a lot better, but it still hasn't at the same time. So maintaining those physical and mental, wellness, right? Helping our kiddos understand that it's okay to prioritize our own health. It's okay to say no to things. It's okay to have those boundaries. This is especially true for your kiddos if you have overachievers that really they're going all at it. They want to have all the grades. They want to have straight A's. They just want to really just go, 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 go. That's a great skill, but this is going to be really important for them because what's going to happen if they don't do this is they're going to have burnout. They're going to get to college and be so stressed out and anxiety ridden, they're going to drop out. I see it happen all the time to students. So being able to help them understand that balance of that is okay to give 110% to this, but guess what? Sometimes we got to shift it and give it 110% to ourselves too. And teaching them how to take breaks and how to work those things into it. That's so important for our youth. This is why I think we have so many kids with really high mental health challenges because they aren't learning how to cope or take care of themselves in a healthy way, right? Going back to those healthy habits. Number four is that resilience. So we talked a little bit about this with the emotional intelligence. At the end of the day, what resilience is your ability to be able to bounce back when things don't go right. It's their ability to say, oh, you know what? That didn't go how I wanted it to go. And instead of saying, well, I give up, I'm done. They just say, all right, well, I'm going to try harder next time. I'm going to push through and do this again. And they're going to just keep going, right? We think of underdogs when we think of resilience, right? They're the team that just keeps going no matter how many times they lose. I'm in Ohio, so the Browns are a great depiction of this, right? They're still there, they're still going, but they have been absolutely horrible for years, but they haven't given up. That resilience is important because a lot of students are lacking this these days. They give up really easily. They hit a roadblock and they just completely fall apart because that resiliency isn't there. So giving your student opportunities to fail in a safe way, to fail in a comfortable way, and then helping them get back up on their feet and keep going. Self-motivation is another one, and especially for teenagers, I see this one all the time. And I'll be honest with you guys, again, another honesty, I can't help it. This is just how it works. This is from experience. More times than not, the reason our kids are struggling with self-motivating is because our parents have been doing it for us. So again, not to be calling anybody out because we've all done it. We've all found ourselves in those positions. But if they want something bad enough, they got to learn how to motivate themselves. They've got to learn how to do that, right? When you are not there and they are on their own in their own apartment and their alarm clock goes off to go to work and they oversleep, that's on them. So we need to learn that at home. I'll be honest, if your teenager is in high school, they should be getting up on their own. They should be getting up and getting ready on their own. They should be doing these things without you. And guess what? If they're late to school, if they start failing classes because they're staying up too late or doing those things. It's so hard as a parent because we don't want that for our kids, but that's how they're going to learn. And I would rather them learn now while they're at home still versus when they're out in the real world. Because failing a test or failing a class is not great, but it's better than getting fired from a job. It's better than being laid off. So it's pick your poison, right? Pick which area you kind of feel is worse. You want them to learn in the real world, or would you rather them learn while they're still at home? So helping them learn how to motivate themselves. And then that independent living skills, right? How to cook, how to clean, right? Just taking care of themselves, that hygiene, right? All the things that kind of go into being a functioning human in the adult world, right? We see I have an adulting shirt that says that says I don't want to adult today, right? But it's understanding that once they're 18, once they leave home, they need to know how to do this stuff because mom and dad hopefully are not going to be coming over and cleaning their house for them all the time or coming over and cooking them meals every night. And we don't want them eating ramen noodles every night. They need to know how to eat healthy food and how to make food and how to do those things and take care of themselves. So again, this one is a tough one because what this means for us as parents is we have to let go of the control. We have to let them do things. And for some of us that are very particular about the way our dishes are cleaned or the way things are prepped in the kitchen, we have to just let it go and be like, it's okay. They're learning. It's fine. It's going to be fine. I can put it back in the right drawer right when they're done. So helping them being hands off and giving them the opportunities to do these things, bringing them in for your younger kiddos. I mean, that's the best time to do some of this stuff because they actually care about it. They actually like it, right? Like our almost 2-year-old, she loves to bring me stuff and do things. When my son was younger, he's like, yes, mommy, I'll help you with this. Like, bring him into the kitchen with you, have him help you cook dinner, have him help you clean the house. Because again, they love it and they enjoy it when they're little and you're teaching it to them. And then it's kind of a habit now, right? Laundry's another one, guys. Not to be there, but your 17-year-old, your 15-year-old, your 12-year-old probably should be doing their own laundry because they need to know how to do that. If they turn all their laundry pink, they learned a lesson out of that, right? They learned what not to do next time. So again, those independent living skills are so important for helping them be self-sufficient when you're not in the picture. Because even if they live right next door to you, they're still going to have their own family, their own friends, their own circle. They're not going to have you there all the time to do everything for them. And I hope and pray that even if they would let you come over and do that, please don't. Please don't do that for them. Let them do it on their own. It's more rewarding that way anyways, right? It's so much better when we do those things for ourselves. Yeah, it's nice to do it every now and then for somebody else, but it goes a long way and it makes us feel better about who we are and it helps our confidence when we know how to do this stuff and we know how to take care of ourselves without help, right? So again, understanding that space. So who here has brought their kids into some of these adulting and independent life skills? Has anybody had some fun experiences with that in the kitchen or crazy laundry stories or
You're so right that you got to let go though when you do that. Like it doesn't have to be the exact way that you do it. It's important that you give them the space to learn, just like we did at one
Mhm.
point, right? That we
Yep.
all go through that.
Yep. Well, it's kind of like when you get married, right? Like my husband, I love him to death and he does all the dishes, but I can't watch him do the dishes. I can't do it. I can't watch because I'm just like twitching, I can't do it. Because I'm like, you don't do them how I do them, right? And
Yeah.
we all have that, but with our kids, we can teach them how we do it. But at the end of the day, they got to learn their own way and methods of
Yeah.
doing the things.
Yep.
Awesome. So last recap for you guys. So empowering your teenager, your students, your kiddos, really number one is modeling all the stuff we talked about at home. That is really the number one way to help your student learn these skills is modeling it at home, showing them how it's done, being that role model for them to look up to. Because even if they're fighting at you and even if they're rolling their eyes at you, at the end of the day, they're still looking up to you because you're still their parent. And they have some level of respect toward you even as they get older encouraging that independence, giving them those opportunities where you're kind of taking your hands off the wheel and letting them have control in a safe environment, create those opportunities for discussion to talk about some of these things, maybe asking them, hey, what's your favorite dinner? What's your favorite food? And then have a conversation about, hey, would you want to come make that with me together? Like, let's go cook it up. I'll show you how to make this, giving them opportunity to put it into practice. At the end of the day, they've got to be able to actually go do the thing. So give them the opportunities to do it. And again, there are so many things you can start younger with kiddos. And my son was starting to do laundry at 8 years old because it's easy. You throw it in the washer, you put some detergent in there, and you push the buttons, and ta-da, and then put it in the dryer when it's done. And then I would help him fold his clothes, and for a couple years until he got that down. Now he does all of it, right? It's starting with small little things. Feeding the animals. That's a great chore for kids that are like 4 and 5 years old. That's an easy thing to do. You can help them scoop the food out and be like, okay, go pour it in the bowl. My daughter is almost 2 and likes to go pick up the pieces and put it back in the bowl. So it's bringing them into that space and letting them get hands-on to really, really try it and put it into practice to really learn these skills. And I know it's a lot, and there's a lot of great tools and tips and tricks and things out there, but it's just getting started. It's just getting out and going and doing it.
Yes. And it's 8 o'clock straight up here. So,
Woo!
is that your last slide, Tracy?
Yes, it is.
Okay, perfect timing. Well, before we jump off, though, there's a couple questions. So, one of them is we'll keep it anonymous here, but what do you do if one of the parents kind of teaches the learned helplessness to make them independent, so they intentionally don't want to leave the house one day?
Yes, that is very, very challenging. And that's something that is a conversation you have to have with your spouse. And that's something you guys have to get on the same page about. And there's probably some deeper thing there of what's motivating that parent to want their kid to stay there. It's probably a fear of, I don't know myself without my kids home. I don't have an identity without my kids being around. It could be, there's a lot of factors that go into a mentality like that. And so it's really helping figure out what's going on with their mindset on why is that what they want, and then helping work through that together and getting on the same page. And it may involve counseling, it may involve bringing somebody else to mediate, to kind of come into the picture to help with that. Because sometimes those things we can't always figure it out on our own without those right questions. And sometimes when our spouse comes to us asking those questions, just like with our teenagers, we put up defensive walls. We say, we feel like we're being attacked or whatever it might be, or we just shut down. And so, but being able to approach with our spouse to understand, well, why is that what they're feeling? Because it's a lot deeper than they just want their kid there forever, right? There's a reason they want their kid there forever. And it's not always just because, oh, I just love my kid and I just want to be around them all the time. That's very, very rarely the case. It's usually something else. And it's usually something personal about that individual. It has absolutely nothing to do really with the kid. So helping your spouse to kind of figure out what that motivator is, what's going on, that's what I want for my student. And then, I mean, parenting at the end of the day, when you're married, or even if you're co-parenting, you got to be on the same page, because it makes it so much more difficult when you're not. Because you have one parent who's talking this language, you have another one who's talking this language. And the more you guys can work together for your kids, even if you despise each other, it's doing it for your kids of, okay, hey, here's what we're working on, here's what we're learning at home, being able to possibly bring in other resources sometimes too to really help with that, because that is a really tough one. And I've seen that in some groups where they're like, I want my kid to be with me forever. And one of the things to really think about too on that end, and helping your spouse sometimes see, or the other parent see, is how that's actually setting your kid up for really, really big failure. Because what happens when you're gone? It's one of those things we don't want to think about or talk about, but at the end of the day, majority of the time, we as parents are going to be gone before our kids are. And so now our kids are going to be there, and they've never known life without that parent. So I think it's important to kind of understand that perspective too, of kind of looking at it from that angle and even asking those questions. What if our kid does live here forever and relies on us completely? What's going to happen to them when we're gone? So being able to have that conversation it's a tough conversation to have, but it's definitely one that needs to be had. And like I said, sometimes bringing somebody else into it.
Hmm. Somebody's asking if it's bringing a coach into the transition to college is useful, especially with kids who have ADHD. Absolutely. There are, Tracy is a good example. There's also ADHD specific executive functioning coaches. And I would say, like, if they're in high school, if they're, say, a senior, even junior, it's a good time to get that coaching started so they can practice when the stakes are a little less and less high, and to kind of get that going. So I do think that can be really great, really great.
Yes, agreed. Absolutely. And my son's ADHD, so I can relate to that.
Yeah, yeah. But in the end, they have to learn it, right? So
Yep.
a lot of times parents are the ones kind of doing the organizing in middle school and high school for kids with ADHD or all the kids. And so, yeah, having that kind of taking that one step back and allowing them to take that on can be very helpful.
Hmm. Exactly. Exactly. Yeah, especially with kids with that, like you said, I mean, even in high school, there's still a lot more hand holding that happens even on the school level. College, it's not like that. And so being able to have that independence and know how to take care of yourself and study and stay accountable when your teachers, your counselor, those people aren't there anymore.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah, that's very good. All right. I think that's everything for tonight. I mean, there's so much great information that you shared with us. I really appreciate that. I normally would pop on our ending slides, but for some reason they're not coming up. So we're probably not going to have that tonight. But I just want to say thank you to everybody that's here live. If you can, before you leave, give us a reaction of some sort so we can say thank you to Tracy. And then in the chat box, just tell us something that you walked away with tonight. That's something you're gonna like, I'm gonna go do that in my household. I'm gonna try this out or change things up. That's always great for us to kind of hear because it gives, Tracy feedback on her presentation, but also if you put it in the chat box, it kind of solidifies it in your mind and it makes it more likely that you're gonna go off and do it. So thank you, Tracy. I really appreciate your time. I know it's later where you are, so you're probably ready for bed. But thank you so much. It was very appreciated. Lots of really great information for all ages. This is extremely helpful.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. Thank you for allowing me to come and talk to everybody. And I appreciate that opportunity. And you all have a wonderful rest of your evening.
Absolutely. Good night, everyone.